I think my audience at the time was about 34,000. I've gained another seven since.
Yeah.
So I was actually in the air to Austin, Texas when news of Justice Breyer's retirement leaked. And I landed and my phone was exploding because, well, of just the news and people asking me for my opinion, media asking me for my opinion, the standard thing that has now happened for, the last number of vacancies, because this is what I do professionally. And I've built myself into one of the nation's experts on Supreme Court confirmation battles. And so I put out a statement. I put out a blog post that's still on Cato's website that you can read. I did some radio interviews. And then I've had a couple of meetings. The purpose of my trip to Austin was to have some meetings and also to attend a friend's celebratory dinner for his career transition, ironically enough, or in parallel. Walked back to my hotel from that dinner and in a festive and feisty mood, and was sort of doom scrolling, as they say, going through my Twitter feed. If I was at home, if I wasn't on a road trip, then I wouldn't be doing this because I'd be with my wife. I would have helped put my kids to bed, and I would not be on my phone right before going to bed. But I was sort of getting more and more upset with President Biden's restricting his pool of candidates by race and gender. He famously, even as a candidate on the campaign trail in the primary, said that he would nominate a black woman. And I thought that was inappropriate and wrong. I don't like judging people based on race and gender. And so that's how I expressed that sentiment, which was inartful. And as you read it, you could tell it's kind of stilted. There were some prepositions missing there, some articles, perhaps. It's the nature of Twitter. That hell site does not allow you to fully express yourself as on a blog post or an op-ed. It does. The incentive is for hot takes, something quick and snarky that will get people's attention. And so that's what happened with that. And obviously, what I was saying is that since I thought Chief Judge Srinivasan of the D.C. Circuit, who's very well known, very well reputed, was on President Obama's short list when Merrick Garland ultimately got the nomination in 2016. Judge Srinivasan was one of those who was considered as a finalist then. So anyway, I in running through my head, because I knew very well, because again, this is what I follow, of who would be any Democratic president would be considering. I thought Sri was going to be the best, but alas, he couldn't be considered because of this racial and gender limitation, and so we will end up with a less qualified, but I had to shorten that to lesser, unfortunately, in the character constraints of Twitter, a black woman. And then I went to bed. I tweeted that out, and I went to bed, and I woke up the next morning, January 27th, and all hell had broken loose on social media. And eventually, this was 4 days before I was supposed to start, 5 days before I was supposed to start at Georgetown, February 1st. Was the beginning of my contract, but ultimately I was onboarded that February 1st, but placed on paid administrative leave, pending investigation into whether my social media commentary violated Georgetown's policies on discrimination and harassment, and that investigation is ongoing.
Yeah. We're again having this conversation in mid-March of 2022, and there is, as you've already alluded to, there's no resolution that has happened at this point. But in as much detail as you are comfortable with and are able to, how do you think back to that? What sounds like a rather flippant comment that maybe you even made on your phone as you're traveling in a different city. I mean, you've had a lot of time to think about this over the last month and a half. How do you think about this personally at this point, and as a greater symbol of our culture right now? You're not the first person to have unartfully have written something online and had the amount of blowback that you have. What does it say about the state of our discourse right now that these mediums can have such immediate consequences for people who, as you said, are not giving nuanced, long form conversational interviews like we're having right now that are, incentivized to provide their feedback on within 280 characters. Any thoughts you have on that? I would love to hear.
Yeah, if I was giving a state of the discourse address, I would say that the state of the discourse is toxic. We simply, on any controversial issue, cannot have a reasoned, good faith discussion. There's an instant assumption of bad faith on your political adversaries, and an instant attempt at using gotcha moments. The Twitter mob, the social media mob forms immediately. I mean, around the same time as my scandal erupted, Whoopi Goldberg was suspended for what some people call anti-Semitism. I didn't think she was anti-Semitic. I thought she was simply didn't know the history very well of the Holocaust and things like that. Joe Rogan with so-called COVID misinformation. I mean, it's just not the way that we should be discussing important issues in the 21st century. And so, I think it points to how social media and other developments have, while enhancing the ability to get information out and people to learn about things, has harmed the quality of our discourse in a lot of ways. 10 years ago, certainly 20 years ago, I couldn't have had this scandal because I wouldn't I wouldn't have written an op-ed or even a blog post 10 years ago of the sort of what I tweeted. I wouldn't be, late at night right before going to bed. I wouldn't be like, oh, let me just go on NBC News and express myself in this manner. So as the barriers to expression have lowered, and that's a good thing in very many senses, because it's enhanced freedom of speech. It's not, you don't just have to go through the gatekeepers at the op-ed page at the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal to make your opinion known. But at the same time, at a time when there's polarization in Congress, when the parties have become more separated and ideologically sorted than at least the Civil War, we're in this period where we just can't discuss controversial issues as adults, and I've sort of become swept into that.